Elias Thorne had learned early in life that some people are born to be loved and others are born to be used. He belonged to the second group. In the Thorne pack, Omegas stood at the very bottom of the ladder, and Elias stood lower than most, because he had no family left to protect him. His parents had died when he was young, leaving him with nothing but a last name that meant power for everyone except him. By the time he turned 23, Elias had grown used to being invisible. He cleaned the training halls, carried firewood for the higher ranks, and ate whatever scraps were left after everyone else had their fill. He never complained. Complaining only brought punishment, and punishment in the Thorne pack was never gentle. He had one memory, though, that he kept locked away like a treasure. 3 years earlier, while gathering herbs near the eastern border, Elias had found a man lying in the mud, bleeding from a wound in his side. The stranger's clothes were torn, and his skin was pale from blood loss. Elias did not know who he was, and he did not ask. He simply brought him to the abandoned cabin he used as a quiet hiding place, cleaned his wounds, and shared the small amount of food he had. The man stayed for 4 days. He barely spoke about himself, but he listened carefully whenever Elias talked, as if every word mattered. On the final morning, before he left, he took Elias's hand and said quietly, "I will remember this. I promise you that." Then he disappeared into the trees, and Elias never saw him again. He told himself it was a nice memory and nothing more. Kindness like that did not return favors in his world. Life moved on, and the memory faded into the background of his hard, quiet days. Everything changed on an ordinary afternoon, when the pack's storage house was found empty. A large sum of money meant for medicine and supplies had vanished without a trace. The Alpha's council gathered quickly, worried and angry, searching for someone to blame before questions could reach the wrong ears. Someone remembered that Elias had been near the storage house days earlier, delivering firewood. That was enough. No one asked why an Omega with no allies and no motive would risk stealing from his own pack. No one asked where the money might have actually gone. They needed a name, and Elias's name was the easiest one to use. He was pulled from his small room in the middle of the night. Rough hands dragged him before the council, and rougher voices declared him guilty before he could even understand what was happening. He tried to explain that he had done nothing wrong, but his words were drowned out by the shouting of men who had already decided his fate. Omegas like him should be grateful they are even allowed to breathe pack air, one elder said coldly. Send him to the underground. Let him remember his place. The underground was a prison built beneath the earth, meant for the worst criminals the pack had ever produced. Its walls were lined with wolfsbane, a poison to werewolves, weakening anyone locked inside and making it impossible to shift into wolf form. Few who entered ever came out the same. Some did not come out at all. Elias was thrown into a cell with a heavy iron door, chains fastened to his wrists, and left in the dark. He did not cry out. He had learned long ago that crying changed nothing. He simply sat against the cold stone wall and waited for a punishment with no end in sight. Days passed, though he lost count of exactly how many. The wolfsbane in the walls made him weak and dizzy, draining his strength little by little. Food came rarely, and water even less. He thought of the stranger from 3 years ago sometimes, wondering if that small moment of kindness had been the last good thing he would ever experience. He had no way of knowing that somewhere far away, powerful search parties had been working for years, trying to find him. The man Elias had saved was not simply a traveler. He was Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Continental Packs, ruler over territories larger than most kingdoms. On the night Elias found him, Kael had been running from an assassination attempt organized by rivals within his own court. Wounded, alone, and hiding his identity, he had stumbled onto Elias's small cabin, more by luck than plan. What he found there surprised him more than any battle ever had. A stranger with almost nothing to his name had shared his food without hesitation, tended his wounds without asking for anything in return, and treated him with a gentleness Kael had rarely experienced, even from those closest to him. Kings were surrounded by people who wanted something from them. This Omega wanted nothing at all. When Kael finally returned to his own lands and reclaimed control after defeating the traitors who had tried to kill him, he never forgot the quiet young man who had saved his life, without knowing who he was saving. He sent trusted scouts in every direction, searching villages and packs for a description that matched the young man's face and voice. Progress was slow, since Kale had never learned his name, but he refused to give up the search. It took 3 years, but finally one of his scouts returned with unmistakable news. A young Omega named Elias, matching the description perfectly, lived in the Thorn Pack, and the same scout carried disturbing rumors alongside the good news. Elias had recently been thrown into the underground on charges of theft, a punishment that very few survived for long. Kale did not wait for a formal invitation. He gathered a small group of his most loyal warriors and rode straight for Thorn territory, his heart pounding with a fear he had not felt in years. When he arrived at the gates of the Thorn Pack, the guards recognized his crest immediately and scrambled to open the doors, bowing low and stammering apologies for their unpreparedness. Kale ignored their nervous greetings entirely. "Where is the underground prison?" he demanded, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the courtyard instantly. The Thorn Alpha himself rushed out, confused and alarmed by the sudden arrival of another kingdom's ruler. "Your Majesty, this is an honor we did not expect. Please, allow us to prepare a proper welcome." "I did not come for a welcome," Kale said. "I came for someone you have locked underground. Take me there now." Sensing the danger in his tone, the Alpha hesitated, glancing nervously at his advisors. "There must be some misunderstanding. The prisoners in the underground are dangerous criminals. One of them saved my life 3 years ago, while asking nothing in return," Kale said, his voice low and dangerous. "If harm has come to him because of your foolish justice, you will regret every decision that led to this moment." The Alpha's face went pale, but pride and fear of losing authority in front of his own council made him stall further, mumbling something about procedures and paperwork needed before any prisoner could be released. That hesitation was the last mistake he made. Kale's patience, already thin from years of searching, disappeared entirely. Right there in the courtyard, in front of stunned pack members, he shifted into his wolf form, a massive silver-black beast, far larger than any wolf the Thorn Pack had ever seen. Before anyone could react, he was already moving toward the entrance of the underground. The heavy iron doors meant to hold the pack's worst criminals were no match for an Alpha King driven by desperation and love. Kale tore through the outer gate with his claws, ignoring the sharp burn of wolfsbane residue coating the metal. Pack warriors tried to stop him, but one look from his eyes sent most of them stumbling backward in fear, their instincts screaming at them that this was not a fight they could win. He ripped through corridor after corridor, following a scent he had memorized for 3 years, growing stronger with every desperate step. Guards who tried to block his path were shoved aside without serious harm, Kale's focus entirely on reaching the cell, holding the only person who had ever shown him true kindness. Finally, he reached a heavy door at the very end of the deepest corridor. Something inside him recognized the faint scent beneath the wolfsbane immediately. With a roar that shook dust from the ceiling, he tore the door from its hinges, using nothing but his claws and raw strength. Inside, chained to the wall, was Elias. His face was pale and thin, his wrists raw from the chains, his eyes barely open. For a moment, Kale simply stood there, his chest heaving, staring at the person he had spent 3 years searching for. Elias lifted his head weakly, confused by the sudden noise and the powerful presence filling the small cell. Who is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Kale shifted back into human form immediately, ignoring the pain still radiating from the wolfsbane burns on his skin. He knelt beside Elias, breaking the chains with his bare hands as gently as he could manage. "It's me," he said softly, "the man you saved 3 years ago. I never forgot you." Recognition slowly filled Elias's tired eyes. "You?" he breathed, hardly believing what he was seeing. "You came back." "I told you I would remember," Kale said, carefully lifting him from the cold stone floor. "I just did not know it would take this long to find you." He carried Elias out of the underground himself, refusing to let anyone else touch him. Warriors and pack members alike stood frozen at the sight of their Alpha King emerging from the ruined prison, cradling an Omega who trembled weakly in his arms. Once outside, Kale turned his attention to the Thorn Alpha, who stood shaking near the courtyard entrance. "Explain to me," Kale said, his voice deadly calm. why this man was locked underground. The Alpha stammered through an explanation about missing pack funds, insisting the evidence pointed toward Elias. But under Kale's cold stare, and with his own warriors quickly investigating the matter, the truth came out within hours. The real thief was not Elias at all, but the Alpha's own son, who had been secretly funneling pack money for his personal debts, and had allowed Elias to take the blame, simply because it was convenient. The Pack Council, faced with undeniable evidence, and the fury of a king who had just torn through their prison with his bare hands, had no choice but to accept the truth. The Alpha's son was stripped of his rank and punished according to pack law, while the Alpha himself and the council members who had rushed to judgment without any real investigation were removed from their positions entirely. Kale did not linger to enjoy the fall of corrupt leaders. His focus remained entirely on Elias, who needed care and rest after weeks of suffering in the dark. He arranged for the pack's best healers to tend to his wounds personally, staying by his side through every hour of his recovery, refusing to leave, even when advisors reminded him of pressing matters back in his own territory. As Elias slowly regained his strength, he found himself overwhelmed by the gentle way Kale cared for him, a stark contrast to the years of neglect and cruelty he had known in the Thorn Pack. Kale spoke softly, listened patiently, and never once made Elias feel like a burden. "Why would you do all this for me?" Elias asked one evening, still weak but finally able to sit up on his own. "I only gave you food and a place to rest. It was nothing special." Kale took his hand gently. "It was everything to me," he said. "You had nothing, yet you gave me everything you had without asking who I was or what I could offer you in return. That kind of heart is rare, Elias. Rarer than any crown or title." In the weeks that followed, as Elias's body healed and his strength slowly returned, something deeper began to grow between them, a quiet understanding built on trust rather than power. Kale made it clear, in front of his own council and the remaining Thorn Pack members, that Elias was not simply someone he owed a debt to, but someone he wished to stand beside for the rest of his life. The announcement shocked many, since tradition dictated that Alpha Kings mated with Alphas, or Betas, of equal standing, never Omegas considered the lowest rank. But Kale cared little for outdated traditions built on cruelty. He declared Elias his chosen mate before witnesses from both packs, silencing any objections with a simple, firm statement. "True worth is not measured by rank, it is measured by heart, and no one I have ever met has a heart like his." The broken Thorn Pack, stripped of its corrupt leadership, was eventually absorbed peacefully into Kale's larger territory, where new, fairer leaders were chosen to guide its people. The underground prison, the place that had almost ended Elias's life, was destroyed completely, its wolfsbane-laced walls torn down and replaced with open fields where nothing dark could ever be hidden again. Elias, once dismissed as worthless and disposable, found himself standing beside the most powerful Alpha King in the land, not because of any bloodline or title, but because of a single act of kindness he had never expected to be repaid. He learned, slowly but surely, that his life was not defined by the cruelty he had endured, but by the quiet strength he had carried through it all. And Kale, who had ruled over vast lands and commanded armies, discovered that the greatest treasure he had ever found was not power or territory, but a gentle soul who had shown him kindness when he had nothing left to offer, and who now stood beside him as his equal in every way that truly mattered.